de gracia, una poca gracia para mi patria, arriba, arriba. My earliest memories of my father, that he was a quiet man. He wasn't one to socialize a lot with lots of people. He liked his privacy. He avoided large groups, large social groups. He was a very smart student. From what I understood, he was very brilliant in school, apparently. He was probably quite popular with his peers. He was very handsome as a child and as a young man, and I think that probably very charismatic. He made a decision, though, not to finish high school. He went to art school in Montreal. He used to go into restaurants, and when he was maybe a bit older, into like lounges or clubs, and he'd sit like for hours at a table by himself, and he would just look across the room and draw people. He actually went to New York to study art from 1930, maybe 1935, 1936, and I'm going to guess. My dad tells me, and I mean, he's told me this repeatedly, I don't think he's fabricating, but he said when he went to the American art school in New York City, that Lauren Bacall used to chase him down the street. So I used to have this image of my father fleeing, like desperately running away from Lauren Bacall. I mean, she must have been quite the beauty in 1935. She was studying acting, I guess. Would have been nice to have had maybe Lauren Bacall as my mom, but obviously I wouldn't be me if that had happened. My father started to exhibit his paintings in Montreal, in Toronto, and New York City, and he was well received. He associated with several different galleries, the West End Gallery, the Colbert Gallery. My father's idea of a wonderful day is just going for a walk in the forest or a walk to the mountain. He didn't demand a lot of stimulation. For many years, he would go away to the Laurentians or the Eastern Townships, and he would pack his easel on his back, and he would hitchhike up north or east to a farm. He'd be wandering, let's say, with his easel on his back and his few belongings, and he'd go onto a farmhouse, wouldn't even know them, knock on their door and say, can I pitch up my tent here for a week and I'll give you a couple of dollars. I want to paint. He painted probably, I think, hundreds of landscapes. My sense is he probably took him about maybe one or 2 weeks to do a painting. I think he was pretty quick in doing a painting. I think today people now are spending months on one painting. I don't know. From the 1935 to 1937, 38, my father was studying in New York. My mother, I was studying social work in McGill. My mother was artistic. I know that she had herself gotten a scholarship to an art school. She was 24 when she married my dad. He was 28. My mother's parents were business people. They went from immigrants with nothing, and they ended up running a garment factory. They really wanted her to meet somebody that was aggressive or ambitious, who wanted to provide for their daughter. She knew who she was marrying. She knew what she was getting into. Sometimes it's hard to be a woman. Giving all your love to just one man. My parents, in terms of their relationship, I think as well, there was a very strong, loving relationship certainly there before the children came. So where I think my father really needed to have this undivided support of my mother. My father never wanted to have kids. That's what I believed, or what my mom told me. I don't think my father would say that I don't recall him saying that to me. I never wanted kids. But I think my mom had said that he didn't want kids because he wanted to be able to be free, to not have to worry about um, it's a big effort to look after children, and the expense and the emotional expense. My mom wanted to have kids. She got pregnant in 53. My sister was born, and I think they were both pleased with that. And my mother was very happy to have a child. A year later, she got pregnant again, this time with twins. And that was very overwhelming for my father. When my mom told my dad that she's going to have twins, he dropped the phone. So it was just too much. Once there were 3 children in the house, it changed the dynamics. He really needed her 100%. And her demands were now being split between her social work, her husband, and her children. And later on, there were her parents that she needed to look after. So where was the time that he was going to have his love in his life? So I think that part was very hard for him. When that support is reduced, where do you find that other support? We weren't wealthy, but my mother did have a career, so we were able to live fairly well. And she allowed my father to pursue his passion and to paint. She was very supportive of that. She was the first psychiatric social worker in Montreal at the Allen Memorial. She ended up being the associate director of Jewish Family Services in Montreal. So my mom worked 9 to 5, Monday to Friday. Because my dad wasn't always bringing home, regular salary, she took on private practice in the evening. So she would work, let's say, maybe Monday nights and Wednesday nights. We'd have these strangers come to the house, ringing the doorbell. This is after we had supper. And often supper is made by my dad, because my mom would come home at 5 or 5:30, and my dad's specialty was making spaghetti, everything in one pan. Like, the noodles, the sauce, was and fast, come on, eat, come on. Well, everything's rush, and it was with sort of the sharp, pungent taste. And I used to say to my siblings, "Oh, Dad makes spaghetti again," and no one ever had spaghetti like that. It was just it was his spaghetti, And I think he was doing it from love, because he knew my mom didn't have time to always make the dinners. Although he was a very private man and very reclusive and aloof, he also had capacity to be very loving and very warm and very affectionate. But it wasn't necessarily in a physical sense. The affection would come maybe through his humor, or just an expression on his face. My father would go to bed. Often he'd be sleeping on the couch in the living room or the dining room around 7 at night. So I'd always have to wonder, can I put the TV on? It was that he was there sleeping and I'm watching TV. So there was kind of a shared living situation, but we weren't doing the same things. He was always on his own schedule. So he would go to sleep around 6 or 7 at night. So he would miss that interaction, let's say, with the kids after supper. He would wake up around midnight, and either he'd take the bus or walk to his studios. In that building, it was a bit unusual. There was a dance school next door. So a lot of beautiful women or young girls would take dance lessons. He was on the 3rd floor, but on the 2nd floor, there was a club. It was a strip club. So my sister and I used to roll our eyes, he really found a nice location. I think my dad was there because rent was cheaper. He would go there at midnight, and often the bus drivers would stop for him, not at the bus stop, but wherever he was, because they knew him. They were like friends, and so he had a special status on the bus. My mother was the associate director for Jewish Family Services in Montreal. She retired in 1985 at the age of 67. In the same year, she just wasn't feeling 100%. She noticed her walking was not as good as she thought it was, and explained that she was finding she didn't have the energy that she used to have. My father was not a type of person to get involved with another person's health issues. That was not his comfort zone. I think I went with her to some doctors, and we were trying to figure out what was happening. At some point, she got a diagnosis of Lou Gehrig's disease. By 1987, she was staying in bed a lot, and then I had a phone call from my father saying that Mom didn't wake up today. She can't wake up. So I went over to the house, and she wouldn't wake up. Called my sister and my brother-in-law, and they said to call 911. She retired in 1985, and she died on February 20th, 1987. I was not that particularly close with my dad. I made a decision to give up my independence, and I moved into my father's house. He had fallen apart. He just wasn't able to function. It was an adjustment. I think it was easier for him than for me. Just the fact that he had somebody, I think, seemed to make it really easy for him to get better. And in a way, it's a paradox for somebody like him who's reclusive and who likes to be alone. I think he really didn't want to be totally alone. My father's depressed, and he wouldn't go out that much. So I said, I think you should start painting again, Dad. He had his easel and all his artwork in the basement. So I just brought the tables up, brought the easel up. He was spending most of his time in the front room, the living room. I think he slept there on the couch. And I said, here you go, start painting. Well, within a couple of days, he started to paint. And actually, some of his better work was in that era, from around 1987 till close to his death. He painted a series of paintings that are portrait paintings, yellow and orange. A positive message in this terrible loss is that my mother's passing away did bring me and my father closer together. While I was living with my dad, the roles became reversed. He became like my child. I was the parent. In terms of my grieving for my mom, I wasn't really able to. I was just too busy looking after my dad. Then my dad was fine. I was able to move on, and I was able to live in Toronto for about 4 years, and then afterwards I moved to Vancouver in the 90s and became even a longer distance caregiver, but I was able to do it because I had the type of job where I had 6 weeks holiday. I think every 2 months I was flying to Montreal. Did that for about 4 or 5 years. Around 1999, my father started to get just more frail and getting close to 90. And so I moved back to Toronto in 1999, and my dad died on New Year's Day, 2002. He painted for about 70 years, from roughly 1932 to 2002. So it's about approximately 70 years. After his death, I became very involved with the paintings. It's 10 years, over 10 years, probably about 10 exhibitions. Large-size exhibitions in Montreal and Vancouver, and started a website. It really was my mom's dream to market the paintings and to manage the paintings, and for my father to continue painting. So I kind of furthered their dream. I don't know if it was my dream, frankly, but Since my father's death, I've had to move the paintings with me. It's kind of like 1,000 children. Okay, let's go, kids. I started renting a warehouse in Montreal, and now I've got 2 storage spaces. The paintings have continued to be very much part of my life, but they sometimes interfere in my life. If I could just sort of live my life from this moment on, it would be, well, a lot less on the walls and just maybe focus on my singing. How long do you manage paintings that aren't showing a huge profit? The paintings I find are work. It requires a lot of PR. But my idea was to maybe sell this condo and buy a mixed commercial residential. So I was looking at places on my holiday in April, and I just thought, geez, how do you spend your holiday? Looking at stores? My brother-in-law sent me an email. He had a conversation with my nephew, an idea. Why don't you do a program? You can go into Jewish nursing homes or non-Jewish seniors' homes, and you have a traveling art show and sing. No one else does that kind of stuff. I think you get these seniors falling out of their lounge chairs that. I just did a show with Rob, and Rob's more of a Las Vegas. He actually worked the cruise ships, and whenever he did his solo, after I sung, I'd get up and start asking the ladies to dance, and I was working the room, as they say. Just the way my father would paint, would take him to a different place. For me, that's when I sing.
For once in my life, I've got someone who needs me, someone I've needed so long. For once, unafraid, I can go where life leads me, and somehow I know I'll be strong. For once, I can touch what my heart used to dream of.